mid-year budget debate reaches the upper chambers. A one-legged man faces the courts for a double homicide charge, and the top cop gives an update on crime. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tyler Simonet with your JCN News for this Monday, March 21st. Debate on the 2021-2022 mid-year budget statement began in the upper chamber on Monday morning. Minister of Economic Affairs, Senator Michael Halkitis, in lead of the debate, reaffirming the government's commitment to restoring the country's economy. Our Lizzie Bastian has more in this report.
Senators debated the mid-year budget report in the upper chamber Monday with Leader of Government Business and Minister of Economic Affairs, Senator Michael Halkitis, reaffirming the government's commitment to restoring the country's economy post-Hurricane Dorian and the COVID-19 pandemic. The economic minister noting that immediately upon coming to office, the Davis-Cooper administration released a supplementary budget centered around several specific priorities to reallocate resources to priority areas to prioritize providing immediate relief to the Bahamian people and to lay the foundation to a robust recovery of the Bahamian economy.
And while we are still in early days, signs have already begun to point to positive progress on achieving these goals. While we do not expect that we will be able to right the ship of state and repair the public finances overnight, we are confident that, as we promised, the plans implemented in the last few weeks are laying a strong foundation to restore and expand the Bahamian economy.
The economic minister also noting that one of the government's top priority is reforming the country's fiscal health, and since the easing of restrictions, this is already being seen in just a few short months since taking office. According to the minister, there are increases in government revenue stemming from the elimination of emergency orders in November of 2021.
While in opposition, Mr. Vice President, we contended that the curfews and lockdowns did little to prevent COVID-19 spread and only stifled our economic rebound. The level of and the length of those lockdowns and curfews, Mr. Vice President. In November 2021, the government eliminated the then existing emergency orders, which imposed limitations on the movement of persons and curfews restricting the hours of business operations. Based on preliminary data from the Treasury, shortly after eliminating emergency orders, government tax receipts in December 2021 immediately rebounded to $202.1 million. And that is even higher than the pre-pandemic level of...
Now, just last evening, the Ministry of Finance released its first monthly fiscal report on government spending for January 2022, in keeping with the requirements of the Public Finances Management Act. Expenditure during the period widened to $241.5 million, largely due to the increases in interest expenditure. As a result of these factors, according to the report, a net deficit of $9.3 million was achieved. Government borrowings during the month totaled $52.2 million and were outpaced by repayments of $111.2 million. As a result, central government's net debt increased during January by $58.9 million. Senator Halkitis noting that at the half-year mark, the deficit is $287.7 million.
Employee compensation increased by $14.6 million. As a result of a reinstatement of promotions and raises owed to public servants which were suspended for the last 2 years due to Hurricane Dorian and the COVID-19 pandemic. Pension and gratuity payments increased by $5.5 million to provide for much overdue cost of living adjustments for retired civil servants. Public debt interest payments increased by $56.6 million. Naturally, with a high level of debt, the interest expense rose. And public corporation subsidies widened by $12.1 million to $217.8 million. And as you know, during the pandemic, there were suspensions on things such as water disconnections, etc. And so the subventions to the public corporations had to be increased.
The economic minister also spoke to inflation during his contribution, noting that not much can be done in the short term. The mid-year budget was passed in the House of Assembly last Thursday. For JCN News, I'm Lissy Bastian.
The mid-year budget debate has reached the upper chambers, and Senator Michaela Barnett Ellis criticizing the government's forecasted cut in expenditures for a number of areas, particularly in the Ministry of Education, Technical and Vocational Training.
Across the board, the government has forecasted that its reoccurring expenses, wages, salaries, supplies, will be reduced next year. The Ministry of Education's expenses will be reduced next year. I get to that. This means less resources, less training, doubtful salary increases, and less hirings. The Ministry of Education is tasked with educating our children, the future of the nation, and providing education to help our citizens and residents remain competitive in the labor force. Thankfully,
Senator Barnett Ellis says that extra resources should be allocated to provide additional training and resources to help teachers and students. She also touched on the forecasted cut in expenditure for the Ministry of National Security, Royal Bahamas Police Force, and the Royal Bahamas Defense Force.
while crime is not a political issue, the failure to provide adequate resources to those persons tasked with securing our protection is scary. The police force has announced that it is establishing a unit to focus on domestic violence. This unit is long overdue, but will require officers to be trained on how to deal with domestic violence complaints. You cannot treat a domestic violence matter the same way you would treat a murder or an armed robbery. But what does this reduced budget mean? Domestic violence training instead of defense tactics training, mass casualty training, leadership training? Does this mean that the police force and the defense force will not be able to hire as many new recruits as usual?
Senator Barnett Ellis claims that the current administration has already taken steps to reduce Bahamians' quality of life. At least one of those 5 weekend murders has a suspect. An amputee man was charged for the double homicide which took place on Thompson Lane on Sunday, March 13th. 28-year-old Raphael McKinney faced Chief Magistrate Joyanne Ferguson Pratt this afternoon and was charged with 2 counts of murder, contrary to Section 2911B of the Penal Code. The particulars are that McKinney, on that same day, while in New Providence, did intentionally cause the deaths of Rogue Bryan and Delton Brennan. According to police reports, 2 men were standing at the end of a residence when a dark sedan pulled up. A lone gunman exited that vehicle and discharged his weapon at the 2 men. One of the men was pronounced dead on the scene. The other was transported to the hospital where he later succumbed to his injuries. Now, while his charges were read to him, McKinney was brought to a point of tears, claiming he was beaten in his cell earlier today by other persons that were in custody as he begged the magistrate to ensure he's protected. He explained that he's in fear for his life. The Chief Magistrate made a note of his claims, which will accompany McKinney at the Bahamas Department of Corrections. Due to the nature of his crimes, he was not required to enter a plea and will return to court on July 26 at 10 a.m. for a service of voluntary bill of indictment. Almost a year later, the top cop provides the media with new information in connection to the Jerome Avenue massacre. He also gives an update on how the investigation is going into a recent armed robbery that has left the woman in hospital in critical condition. Here's Laurencia Smith with that report.
Suspects in connection to the Jerome Avenue massacre were taken into custody, but were released due to insufficient evidence. This according to Commissioner of Police Paul Roll, who updated reporters on Monday during a sideline interview at a Police Month outreach event at Unity House.
We have had persons in custody. Some of the main suspects that we have, there was insufficient evidence to proceed with charging before the court, and they were subsequently released. So if persons have more information that can help us to advance this investigation, and I would encourage them to bring that information to the police and help us to advance this investigation.
In April of last year, 6 men were shot dead and a woman and a 2-year-old child were injured during that massacre. On several previous occasions, the top cop noted to the media that the alleged suspects either died or skipped town. Meantime, Commissioner Roll also provided an update on that armed robbery that occurred on Saturday past in the Pinewood Gardens community, which resulted in a woman being shot in the face. That woman is currently in hospital listed in critical condition. He says the police are concerned when these incidents of armed robbery occur.
When we see things like that happen, I believe this is the second incident now where particularly a female was shot. I said to the media a couple of weeks ago and expressed my concern with this increase, with these robberies, the persons being followed home. Now again, I want to re-echo the persons to be aware of their surroundings, especially women and men as well, when they're moving home. But these youngsters are preying on the weaker vessels. Right?
The commissioner vowed that he and his officers will do everything to keep the Bahamian public safe. Within the last 10 days, the police have reported more than 4 homicides, which is alleged to be connected to a turf war.
Today, you have a person going to court charged for murder. This whole issue of retaliation has to stop. I've been saying for a while now that persons like to try to settle their disputes themselves. That's not the way civilized society behaves. That's why we have the courts. Okay? When you have disputes, you should go to the court first and not try to resort strictly to violence.
Overall, the top cop is asking the public to assist the police with any information they may have related to any crime matters. I'm Laurencia Smith for JCN News.
The Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture officially announces the return of the Job Readiness Program. In a press conference held this morning, Youth, Sports and Culture Minister Mario Boleg explains and outlines the importance of this initiative.
This ministry is a ministry I think has the greatest opportunity to impact the youth of our nation. And the Job Readiness Program is a program that caters to students between the age of 16 and 18 that will propel them and prepare them with the necessary soft skills to allow them to be employable. Often too many times, even many of us who stand before me now, we will take time and not pay attention while we were in school and yes, play around, and then we find ourselves in the job market seeking employment, and it's becoming very difficult. So this ministry is doing its part as ensuring that we prepare our students to be able to be employable for when they get ready for the job market, and that's what we want to do. We want to reduce the amount of unemployment in the country, and to assist with that is to give them a second chance to get the necessary training that will allow them to be employable.
The Job Readiness Program is just one of many government-funded initiatives that seeks to provide recent high school graduates who may not have attained their necessary certifications and training the tools and soft skills necessary to adequately compete for opportunities in the job market.
We do our best to accept most applicants that meet the eligibility criteria. What we do is about 4 weeks ahead of the program start date, we put out applications. This year, the applications would have been on a virtual platform online. And so we would have had students complete the application, turn in the necessary documents. Once the applications are reviewed and they're considered eligible, we invite them in for an interview that is conducted by the officers here within the division who know what we're looking for. And those students are almost always, if they meet the criteria and they exude the passion to accept the skills that we're interested in teaching, we always call them.
Program Director Alexia Roll issued a call to private sector entities that may want to get involved with the development of the nation's youth.
It's fully government funded. The partnerships that we have formed with the corporate organizations are solely for the internship component of the program. We realize that it is a win-win situation for the organizations that we're partnering with. The young people are able to get the experience that they need by having work experience through the organizations, and the organizations are now having access to a pool of applicants that are not only getting fresh skills, but have the passion and energy to want to access the job market. And for any corporate organizations under the sound of my voice that are interested in offering the opportunities to students and want to partner with us, you can feel free to call the Division of Youth and connect with us.
You're watching JCN News. Stay with us.